Hey everyone, today we're going to discuss about comparing the sample proportion and population proportion. So in our previous lessons, we've learned how to compare the sample mean and the population mean given that the condition when the sample size is large or the sample size is small. But this time, we're going to discuss about how we're going to compare a sample proportion and a population proportion. In this case, there's no need for any parameter if the sample size is small or large. Okay? Regardless of that, we're always gonna be using the z-test of one sample proportion. So, kapag nagko-compare tayo ng proportion, laging z-test of one sample proportion ang gamitin natin. Ha? It doesn't matter kung less than or greater than 30 ba siya kasi yung yung parameter na 30 and above or less than 30, hindi naman siya affected kay proportion eh. Kasi hindi naman na-apply ang central limit theorem kapag proportion. Okay? So, yun. The test value for z-test of one sample proportion can be determined using this formula. Z is equal to sample proportion minus the hypothesized population proportion divided by the square root of PQ over N. Okay? Yan. P, again, population proportion. Q is the complement of the population proportion. N is the sample size. So, ano yung gagamitin nating critical values dito? So, given a level of significance, we still make use of the same table that we had dun sa last lesson natin about dun sa comparing sample mean and population mean when the sample size is large. Diba gumamit tayo ng Z distribution dun? Dito naman kay population proportion, ganun din gagamitin natin. We make use of the Z distribution. So, same lang din naman. So, kailangan alam natin kung 1-tailed or 2-tailed siya and kung ano yung level of significance natin. Kung 0.01 ba or 0.05. So, let's have an example. Ganun pa rin naman yung steps eh. Same steps pa rin naman. Kung napapansin nyo lang yung sa mga test natin, ang naiiba lang dyan yung paano yung test value and paano yung critical value. So, that matters kasi. Pero yung steps lang, generally, they all boil down the same process. For example, a motivational speaker claims that 75% of young adults will experience culture shock attributed to the transition to adulthood. When they surveyed among 60 young adults, 40 of them said that they experienced culture shock due to adulthood. Test the hypothesis at 0.01 level of significance. So let's state the null and alternative hypothesis. So ano ba yung parameter natin dito? Yung parameter natin yung proportion ng young adults na nako-culture shock because of adulthood. And the hypothesized population value is 75%. So ang null hypothesis natin, the proportion of young adults who experience culture shock due to transition to adulthood is 75%. Equal sila. And ang alternative natin is not 75%. So, we use the not equal sign. Bakit not equal sign? Kasi dun sa claim, ito yung claim, di ba? It claimed that 75% of young adults will experience culture shock attributed to the transition to adulthood. Wala namang nabanggit na more than or less than. So, kapag ganun ang case, we just write here not 75%. It's either less than or more than. Okay? Basta hindi equal kay 75%. So, ayan. So, in our given problem, we can observe that n is equal to 60. So, we use the z-test of one sample proportion. Actually, wala naman bearing yung sample size. Kasi regardless kung ano yung size ng sample natin, we use the z-test of one sample proportion since this is a proportion. Alternative hypothesis, use the phrase not. So, the test is a two-tailed test. Also, the level of significance is 0.01. So, check natin table. Two-tailed, 0.01 ang level of significance. So, ito yun. We make use of the value 2.58. So, the critical values is positive, negative 2.58. We use both the positive and negative values. Bakit? Kasi two-tailed siya. Pag two-tailed kasi, we both use the positive and negative values. Kapag one-tailed, din lang tayo nagde-decide kung positive pa siya or negative siya. So let's determine the test value using the test statistic or formula. We make use of this formula to solve for the z-test statistic. So, balikan natin yung mga given values natin. So, balik tayo kay problem. Ito yung problem. And let's have the values. Ano yung sample proportion? Na-survey siya kay 60 ang adults, 40 ang nag-yes, na culture shock nga sila. So the sample proportion is 40 over 60 or 0.667. They round it off to 3 decimal places. Population proportion or the hypothesized population proportion is 75%. The complement is 0.25. Paano na po 0.25? That's 1 minus 0.75. 0.25. And the sample size, ilan yung in-interview? 60. Ito. So n equals 60. So let's substitute these values on the formula. P hat, 0.667. Population proportion, 0.75. P, 0.75. Q, 0.25. Sample size, 60. Let's compute this value on our calculator. We get negative 1.48. So that is our test statistic. Z equals negative 1.48. Okay? So we now have a test statistic. We can now decide if we're going to reject the null hypothesis or not. So ang kailangan natin doon, test statistic at check critical values. Ano nga ulit yung critical values natin? Positive, negative 2.58. So we plot it here. Negative 2.58, positive 2.58. And where is the test statistic? Negative 1.48. Somewhere here. So, ayan. So, we can see here that the negative 1.68, it does not lie on the rejection region. Wala sa rejection region. Kasi ito yung rejection region, di ba? So, we failed to reject the null hypothesis. So, anong conclusion natin? So, balik tayo kay step 1. Since we failed to reject the null hypothesis, babalik tayo sa statement na to. The proportion of young adults who experience culture shock due to transition of adulthood is 75%. We failed to reject this. And ano nga yung claim ng motivational speaker? Ito mismo. Saktong 75% na ng young adults yung nako-culture shock. So the speaker's claim is correct kasi we failed to reject it. Okay? But we can perform other tests para matry naman natin. Baka mamaya, di naman natin masasabi na very much accepted na siya. Kasi we just failed to reject it. Okay? We can conduct another study to verify kung tama pa talaga yung claim ng speaker. So, that's how we go around in testing the sample proportion and the population proportion. So, marami pa tong examples. Please check these examples. Aralin, try yung sagutan din. May answers naman. So, similar with comparing the sample mean and the sample population mean. This is population mean. We can also compare the sample proportion and the population proportion using the z-test of one sample proportion. The same principles apply in this case. We verify if a hypothesized population proportion is correct or not by checking if we reject our null hypothesis or not. So, I hope you naging clear sa inyo on how we compare the sample proportion and population proportion. Ang next lesson naman natin would be how we perform correlation and regression analysis. Medyo heavy yun kasi mahaba ang steps nun. So, ayun. I hope you guys learned a lot today. Thank you guys for watching and see you guys on our next lesson.